SAA Certified Solutions Architect. Associate SAA-C03 exam practice questions with explanations are available in the video for you to study. A company runs a highly available image processing application on Amazon EC2 instances in a single VPC. The EC2 instances run inside several subnets across multiple availability zones. The EC2 instances do not communicate with each other, however. The EC2 instances download images from Amazon S3 and upload images to Amazon S3 through a single NAT gateway. The company is concerned about data transfer charges. What is the most cost-effective way for the company to avoid regional data transfer charges? A. Launch the NAT gateway in each availability zone. B. Replace the NAT gateway with a NAT instance. C. Deploy a gateway VPC endpoint for Amazon S3. D. Provision an EC2 dedicated host to run the EC2 instances. The answer is A. In this scenario, the company wants to avoid regional data transfer charges while downloading and uploading images from Amazon S3. To accomplish this at the lowest cost, the NAT gateway should be launched in each availability zone that the EC2 instances are running in. This allows the EC2 instances to route traffic through the local NAT gateway instead of sending traffic across an availability zone boundary and incurring regional data transfer fees. This method will help reduce the data transfer costs since inter-availability zone data transfers in a single region are free of charge. A solutions architect is using Amazon S3 to design the storage architecture of a new digital media application. The media files must be resilient to the loss of an availability zone. Some files are accessed frequently while other files are rarely accessed in an unpredictable pattern. The solutions architect must minimize the costs of storing and retrieving the media files. Which storage option meets these requirements? A. S3 Standard. B. S3 Intelligent Tiering. C. S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard IA. D. S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone IA. The answer is B. S3 Intelligent Tiering. Perfect use case when you don't know the frequency of access or irregular patterns of usage. Amazon S3 offers a range of storage classes designed for different use cases. These include S3 Standard for general-purpose storage of frequently accessed data, S3 Intelligent Tiering for data with unknown or changing access patterns, S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard IA, and S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone IA, for long-lived, but less frequently accessed data, and Amazon S3 Glacier, S3 Glacier, and Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive, S3 Glacier Deep Archive, for long-term archive and digital preservation. If you have data residency requirements that can't be met by an existing AWS region, you can use the S3 Outposts storage class to store your S3 data on premises. Amazon S3 also offers capabilities to manage your data throughout its lifecycle. Once an S3 lifecycle policy is set, your data will automatically transfer to a different storage class without any changes to your application. A company is storing backup files by using Amazon S3 Standard Storage. The files are accessed frequently for 1 month. However, the files are not accessed after 1 month. The company must keep the files indefinitely. Which storage solution will meet these requirements most cost-effectively? A. Configure S3 intelligent tiering to automatically migrate objects. B. Create an S3 lifecycle configuration to transition objects from S3 Standard to S3 Glacier Deep Archive after 1 month. C. Create an S3 lifecycle configuration to transition objects from S3 Standard to S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard IA, after 1 month. D. Create an S3 lifecycle configuration to transition objects from S3 Standard to S3 One-Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One-Zone IA, after 1 month. The answer is B. The storage solution that will meet these requirements most cost-effectively is B. Create an S3 lifecycle configuration to transition objects from S3 Standard to S3 Glacier Deep Archive after 1 month. Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive is a secure, durable, and extremely low-cost Amazon S3 storage class for long-term retention of data that is rarely accessed and for which retrieval times of several hours are acceptable. It is the lowest cost storage option in Amazon S3, making it a cost-effective choice for storing backup files that are not accessed after 1 month. You can use an S3 lifecycle configuration to automatically transition objects from S3 Standard to S3 Glacier Deep Archive after 1 month. This will minimize the storage costs for the backup files that are not accessed frequently. A company observes an increase in Amazon EC2 costs in its most recent bill. The billing team notices unwanted vertical scaling of instance types for a couple of EC2 instances. A solutions architect needs to create a graph comparing the last 2 months of EC2 costs and perform an in-depth analysis to identify the root cause of the vertical scaling. How should the solutions architect generate the information with the least operational overhead? A. Use AWS budgets to create a budget report and compare EC2 costs based on instance types. B. Use Cost Explorer's granular filtering feature to perform an in-depth analysis of EC2 costs based on instance types. C. Use graphs from the AWS Billing and Cost Management dashboard to compare EC2 costs based on instance types for the last 2 months. D. Use AWS cost and usage reports to create a report and send it to an Amazon S3 bucket. Use Amazon QuickSight with Amazon S3 as a source to generate an interactive graph based on instance types. The answer is B. SAA-C Cost Explorer is a tool that enables you to view and analyze your costs and usage. You can explore your usage and costs using the main graph, the Cost Explorer Cost and Usage Reports, or the Cost Explorer Re-Reports. You can view data for up to the last 12 months, forecast how much you're likely to spend for the next 12 months, and get recommendations for what reserved instances to purchase. You can use Cost Explorer to identify areas that need further inquiry and see trends that you can use to understand your costs. A company needs to review its AWS cloud deployment to ensure that its Amazon S3 buckets do not have unauthorized configuration changes. What should a solutions architect do to accomplish this goal? A. Turn on AWS config with the appropriate rules. B. Turn on AWS Trusted Advisor with the appropriate checks. C. Turn on Amazon Inspector with the appropriate assessment template. D. Turn on Amazon S3 server access logging. Configure Amazon Event Bridge, Amazon CloudWatch events. The answer is A. To ensure that Amazon S3 buckets do not have unauthorized configuration changes, a solutions architect should turn on AWS config with the appropriate rules. SAA-C03 is a service that allows users to audit and assess their AWS resource configurations for compliance with industry standards and internal policies. It provides a detailed view of the resources and their configurations, including information on how the resources are related to each other. By turning on AWS config with the appropriate rules, users can identify and remediate unauthorized configuration changes to their Amazon S3 buckets. A development team runs monthly resource-intensive tests on its general-purpose Amazon RDS for MySQL-DB instance with performance insights enabled. The testing lasts for 48 hours once a month and is the only process that uses the database. The team wants to reduce the cost of running the tests without reducing the compute and memory attributes of the DB instance. Which solution meets these requirements most cost-effectively? A. Stop the DB instance when tests are completed. Restart the DB instance when required. B. Use an auto-scaling policy with the DB instance to automatically scale when tests are completed. C. Create a snapshot when tests are completed. Terminate the DB instance and restore the snapshot when required. D. Modify the DB instance to a low-capacity instance when tests are completed. Modify the DB instance again when required. The answer is A. To reduce the cost of running the tests without reducing the compute and memory attributes of the Amazon RDS for MySQL-DB instance, the development team can stop the instance when tests are completed and restart it when required. Stopping the DB instance when not in use can help save costs because customers are only charged for storage while the DB instance is stopped. During this time, automated backups and automated DB instance maintenance are suspended. When the instance is restarted, it retains the same configurations, security groups, and DB parameter groups as when it was stopped. A company that hosts its web application on AWS wants to ensure all Amazon EC2 instances, Amazon RDS-DB instances, and Amazon Redshift clusters are configured with tags. The company wants to minimize the effort of configuring and operating this check. What should a solutions architect do to accomplish this? A. Use AWS config rules to define and detect resources that are not properly tagged. B. Use Cost Explorer to display resources that are not properly tagged. Tag those resources manually. C. Write API calls to check all resources for proper tag allocation. Periodically run the code on an EC2 instance. D. Write API calls to check all resources for proper tag allocation. Schedule an AWS Lambda function through Amazon CloudWatch to periodically run the code. The answer is A. To ensure all Amazon EC2 instances, Amazon RDS-DB instances, and Amazon Redshift clusters are configured with tags, a solutions architect should use AWS config rules to define and detect resources that are not properly tagged. SAA-C03 rules are a set of customizable rules that AWS Config uses to evaluate AWS resource configurations for compliance with best practices and company policies. Using AWS Config rules can minimize the effort of configuring and operating this check because it automates the process of identifying non-compliant resources and notifying the responsible teams. A development team needs to host a website that will be accessed by other teams. The website contents consist of HTML, CSS, client-side JavaScript, and images. Which method is the most cost-effective for hosting the website? A. Containerize the website and host it in AWS Fargate. B. Create an Amazon S3 bucket and host the website there. C. Deploy a web server on an Amazon EC2 instance to host the website. D. Configure an application load balancer with an AWS Lambda target that uses the Express.js framework. The answer is B. In static websites, web pages are returned by the server which are pre-built. They use simple languages such as HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. There is no processing of content on the server, according to the user, in static websites. Web pages are returned by the server with no change, therefore, static websites are fast. There is no interaction with databases. Also, they are less costly as the host does not need to support server-side processing with different languages. In dynamic websites, web pages are returned by the server which are processed during runtime means they are not pre-built web pages but they are built during runtime according to the user's demand. These use server-side scripting languages such as PHP, Node.js, ASP.NET and many more supported by the server. So, they are slower than static websites but updates and interaction with databases are possible. A company hosts its multi-tier applications on AWS. For compliance, governance, auditing, and security, the company must track configuration changes on its AWS resources and record a history of API calls made to these resources. What should a solutions architect do to meet these requirements? A. Use AWS CloudTrail to track configuration changes and AWS Config to record API calls. B. Use AWS Config to track configuration changes and AWS CloudTrail to record API calls. C. Use AWS Config to track configuration changes and Amazon CloudWatch to record API calls. D. Use AWS CloudTrail to track configuration changes and Amazon CloudWatch to record API calls. The answer is B. SAA-C03 is a fully managed service that allows the company to assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of its AWS resources. It provides a detailed inventory of the resources in use and tracks changes to resource configurations. SAA-C03 can detect configuration changes and alert the company when changes occur. It also provides a historical view of changes, which is essential for compliance and governance purposes. SAA-C CloudTrail is a fully managed service that provides a detailed history of API calls made to the company's AWS resources. It records all API activity in the AWS account, including who made the API call, when the call was made, and what resources were affected by the call. This information is critical for security and auditing purposes, as it allows the company to investigate any suspicious activity that might occur on its AWS resources. A company is hosting a static website on Amazon S3 and is using Amazon Route 53 for DNS. The website is experiencing increased demand from around the world. The company must decrease latency for users who access the website. Which solution meets these requirements most cost-effectively? A. Replicate the S3 bucket that contains the website to all AWS regions. Add Route 53 geolocation routing entries. B. Provision accelerators in AWS Global Accelerator. Associate the supplied IP addresses with the S3 bucket. Edit the Route 53 entries to point to the IP addresses of the accelerators. C. Add an Amazon CloudFront distribution in front of the S3 bucket. Edit the Route 53 entries to point to the CloudFront distribution. D. Enable S3 transfer acceleration on the bucket. Edit the Route 53 entries to point to the new endpoint. The answer is C. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network, CDN, that caches content at edge locations around the world, providing low latency and high transfer speeds to users accessing the content. Adding a CloudFront distribution in front of the S3 bucket will cache the static website's content at edge locations around the world, decreasing latency for users accessing the website. This solution is also cost-effective as it only charges for the data transfer and requests made by users accessing the content from the CloudFront edge locations. Additionally, this solution provides scalability and reliability benefits as CloudFront can automatically scale to handle increased demand and provide high availability for the website.